Hello, 5th and 6th grade. This is your history video for Wednesday, May 12th, and we're looking at the 2 pages to read, 296, 297, but we're also looking at 4 pages to do, 2 regular pages and then 2 study guide pages. So you've got a good bit of work to do, so we'll go ahead and do this video quickly. Of course, you can stop it to listen to the answers if you need to. The Roman Catholic Church, church leadership. The patriarch of the Roman Catholic Church was called the Pope, a title that comes from the Latin word for father. He gradually extended his leadership over the church in all of Western Europe. Most Europeans followed his teachings. Underneath the Pope were bishops who acted as leaders within districts. The Pope and the bishops directed the activities of the clergy during the Middle Ages. Some clergymen lived among the people. They ministered as priests in the churches. They led the services and instructed people on how to live and worship. The priests preserved and developed many of the doctrines that Christians hold even today. However, over time, the priests taught that the church and its leaders had a role in salvation. Many of them began to teach that people could not receive God's grace without the help of a priest. They also taught that, to be saved, people had to participate in certain religious ceremonies called sacraments. Other clergymen, called monks, lived in large monasteries. Many monks vowed to never marry and instead to devote their lives to serving the Roman Catholic Church. One famous monk was Benedict. He founded a monastery and wrote a set of rules for monks to follow. This set of rules was called the Benedictine Rule. During the early Middle Ages, monasteries were primarily places where education and art were valued. Literature, science, mathematics, and medicine were not often taught to the common people, but some monks learned to read and write. These monks spent hours copying the scriptures and the writings from the early centuries of the church. They bent over their desks, scratching with quill pens for hours at a time. The word clerical, describing office work, can be traced to this task of clergymen in the Middle Ages. Another group of clergymen was the Friars, and that's your secret word because I think it's a cool word. Friar comes from a Latin word for brother. Like the monks, friars dedicated their lives to service. Neither monks nor friars owned property. However, friars were different from monks in several ways. Friars did not live in monasteries. Instead, they lived among the people and were traveling ministers. They had simple lives and often begged for food. Friars wore plain robes, and some did not wear shoes. A friar's main goal was to teach people how to live good lives. Some women also devoted their lives to the church. These women who took religious vows were called nuns. Nuns lived in convents. They took vows to live lives of poverty, chastity, and obedience to the church. Chastity basically means that they would not marry. The Roman Catholic beliefs. The Roman Catholic Church teaches that baptism is needed to remove the sins that all people have as descendants of Adam. Baptism is the means by which a person is justified. However, baptized people are tempted to sin. The righteousness that comes at baptism is maintained through living rightly and doing penance when one sins. Penance involves sorrow over sin, confession of that sin to a priest, and the doing of deeds that make satisfaction or compensation for the sin. Also, the Eucharist, or Lord's Supper, is important for maintaining the salvation begun in baptism. Medieval theologian Peter Lombard wrote, "By baptism we are cleansed, by the Eucharist we are perfected in the good." The Eucharist restores us spiritually. The Eucharist is viewed as spiritually helpful because it is believed to be a representation of Jesus' sacrifice. People believe the bread changes into the body of Jesus and the wine changes into his blood, though outwardly they still taste and feel like bread and wine. At the end of the medieval period, those who would later be referred to as Protestants tried to reform the Roman Catholic Church to a true biblical position, but were driven out of it. At the heart of the Protestant position was the belief that the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church regarding baptism, penance, and the Eucharist were not found in the Bible. Protestants argued that the Bible teaches that justification comes through faith alone. In addition, when Christians sin, they do not need to do penance for their sin. Christ has paid for their sin already, and although Christians need to repent of their sins and confess them to God, many Protestants concluded that they do not need to confess them to a priest. Many Protestants also rejected the claim that Christ's literal body and blood were present in the bread and wine of the Lord's Supper. Now, the sacraments there, it says by the 1200s, the Roman Catholic Church had developed 7 sacraments it believed were necessary for receiving the grace needed for salvation. Number 1, baptism. Number 2, confirmation, which is basically a time when someone becomes a member of the Catholic Church. Number 3, the Eucharist, which is the Lord's Supper, what we would call the Lord's Supper, although to them it's a lot different. penance, which means something that somebody does, basically, something they do that's a good work for somebody else. They earn their way to heaven, or earn that right. The last rites are given to a seriously ill or dying person to provide forgiveness of sins. Holy orders give priests the power to absolve or pardon sin and to conduct the Eucharist. And then matrimony gives grace to a husband and wife in marriage to strengthen their union and make it unbreakable. Now, you can't do number 6 and 7. So those basically, one takes the place of the other as far as the Catholic Church goes in sacraments. All right, well, that's it. Have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully you caught the secret word. Bye.